I never thought a patch of ice on a playground would end with 3 injured kids and me facing down the entire homeowners association board in court. But that's exactly what happened last winter in Lakewood, Colorado. My name is Thomas Brennan, and I had been living in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision for about 5 years when this mess started. It was January, one of those brutal Colorado winters where the temperature stayed below freezing for weeks at a time. The neighborhood playground sat right at the edge of my property line, technically on HOA land but close enough that I could see it from my kitchen window. The playground equipment was nothing fancy, just some swings, a slide, and one of those climbing structures that kids love to hang all over. The ice situation started after a particularly nasty ice storm. The playground equipment got coated in about a 1/4 inch of ice, and the ground around it turned into a skating rink. I noticed it on a Tuesday morning while drinking my coffee. The sun was hitting the ice just right, making everything sparkle like diamonds. It was actually pretty beautiful in a dangerous sort of way. That same afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, there stood Patricia Anderson, the president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, wearing her usual expression that made her look like she had just smelled something rotten. She was maybe 50 years old with blonde hair that she obviously spent way too much money maintaining, and a designer coat that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Thomas," she said, not bothering with any greeting, "I need you to take care of that ice situation on the playground." I blinked at her, confused. "The playground? That's HOA property, Patricia. I don't have anything to do with that." She pulled out her phone and showed me some kind of document. "According to our property survey, the edge of the playground sits partially on your property line. That makes you responsible for maintenance." I leaned in to look at the document. It was dated from 1987, long before any of the current residents had moved into the neighborhood. The boundary lines were vague at best, and honestly, I was not convinced it was even legitimate. "Patricia, even if that's true, which I doubt, the ice is all over the playground equipment, not just the edge. That's clearly HOA responsibility." Her face got that pinched look that meant she was about to go into full Karen mode. "The HOA board has determined that you need to remove the ice. We're sending you an official notice tomorrow. You have 48 hours to comply or face fines." "This is ridiculous," I said. "Why don't you just hire someone to do it? The HOA has a maintenance budget." "Budget constraints," she snapped. "We've already spent our quarterly allocation on the new entrance sign." That entrance sign. Do not even get me started. They had spent nearly $15,000 on this massive stone monument at the neighborhood entrance with the subdivision name in fancy letters. Meanwhile, half the streetlights were out and the community pool had been closed for repairs for 3 months. "Then I suggest you figure something else out because I'm not responsible for that playground," I said, keeping my voice level. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. Expect the official notice." She turned and clicked her way down my driveway in her expensive heels. Sure enough, the next day I found a certified letter taped to my door. The notice was 3 pages long, full of legal jargon and references to obscure HOA bylaws. The basic message was clear. Remove all ice from the playground equipment and surrounding area within 48 hours or face a fine of $100 per day until compliance. I called my neighbor Mike, who was a lawyer, though he specialized in divorce cases, not property law. He came over that evening and looked over the notice. "This is pretty aggressive," Mike said, flipping through the pages. "Do you actually want to fight this?" "It's the principle of the thing," I said. "They can't just dump their responsibilities on me because they wasted their budget on a vanity project." Mike nodded slowly. "Okay, but here's the thing. Fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. Even if you're right, which you probably are, it could take months to resolve. In the meantime, those fines add up. So what do I do? Technically, if you do nothing and someone gets hurt on that playground, the HOA could try to claim it's your responsibility since they notified you of the hazard. It's a weak argument, but they could try. Could try being the key words there, I said, right. But Thomas, man to man, is this worth it? Just go out there with some salt and hot water, clear the ice, and be done with it. I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to do just that, to take the easy road. But another part of me, the part that was sick of Patricia and her board's constant overreach and petty power games, wanted to stand my ground. No, I said finally. I'm not doing it. That's not my responsibility, and I'm not going to validate their nonsense by complying. Mike sighed. Okay, your call, but document everything. Take pictures, keep copies of all communications. If this goes sideways, you'll need a paper trail. He was right about that. I spent that evening taking detailed photos of the playground, the ice, and the property lines. I even pulled up the official property survey from when I bought the house, which clearly showed that the playground was entirely on HOA land. The 1987 document Patricia had shown me was apparently something the HOA board had discovered in their files, but it contradicted the official county records. The 48-hour deadline came and went. I did not touch the ice. The temperature stayed below freezing, so it was not like it was going anywhere anyway. 3 days later, I received another notice, this time informing me that I was being fined $100 per day starting immediately. I drafted a response letter explaining that I disputed their claim about the property line and that the ice removal was their responsibility, not mine. I sent it certified mail to create my own paper trail. Things stayed quiet for about a week. The playground remained iced over and unused. Most parents in the neighborhood were smart enough to keep their kids away from it. I saw a few families walk over to it, take one look at the ice, and leave. Nobody tried to use it. Then the weather did something weird. We got a warm spell, one of those random January thaws where the temperature suddenly jumps up to 50 degrees. The ice started melting during the day but then refreezing at night, creating this cycle where it would get slushy and then turn back into a slick, dangerous mess. In some ways, it got worse because the surface looked less obviously icy. On a Saturday morning, about 2 weeks after Patricia's first visit, I was inside working on some paperwork when I heard shouting outside. I looked out the window and saw a group of kids on the playground. My stomach dropped. There were 5 or 6 of them, maybe between 8 and 10 years old, climbing on the equipment despite the ice. I grabbed my coat and headed outside, planning to tell them the playground was closed, but before I could get there, I heard a scream. One of the kids, a boy in a red jacket, had slipped on the icy ladder of the climbing structure and fallen. He was on the ground, holding his arm and crying. Parents came running from different directions. The boy's mother got there first, kneeling beside him. "Don't move, sweetie, don't move," she was saying, her voice panicked. I reached the edge of the playground, staying back to not crowd them. Another parent was already on the phone, calling for an ambulance. The boy was crying hard, clearly in real pain. "What happened?" someone asked. "He fell," another kid said, pointing at the ladder. "It was really slippery." The mother looked up and seemed to notice the ice for the first time. "Why is there ice all over this playground? Where's the maintenance?" I felt a knot forming in my stomach. This was exactly what Mike had warned me about. The ambulance arrived about 10 minutes later. The paramedics examined the boy and determined he had probably broken his arm. They loaded him onto a stretcher and took him to the hospital, his mother going with him. After they left, Several parents stood around talking in angry voices. I heard my name mentioned a couple of times, which made me nervous. I went back inside, my good intentions of warning the kids now feeling hollow. Maybe I should have done more. Maybe I should have put up signs or caution tape. But then again, was that my responsibility? The playground was not mine. I had not invited those kids there. The HOA owned it and should have maintained it or closed it. That afternoon, Patricia showed up at my door again, this time with 2 other HOA board members. One was Dennis Shaw, the treasurer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who always looked nervous. The other was Linda Martinez, the secretary, a stern woman in her 60s who taught at the local high school. "Thomas Brennan," Patricia said formally. "We need to discuss the incident that occurred today." "What about it?" I asked. "A child was injured on the playground that you refused to maintain," she said. "We hold you directly responsible." "That playground is not my property," I said firmly. "I've told you this multiple times. I've shown you the property survey. You can't just make it my responsibility because you want it to be." Dennis pushed his glasses up his nose nervously. "Thomas, regardless of the property line dispute, we notified you of a hazard. By refusing to address it, you created a dangerous situation." "No, you created a dangerous situation by failing to maintain HOA property," I shot back. "You could have hired someone to clear the ice. You could have closed the playground. You could have put up warning signs. Instead, you tried to pass the buck to me, and when I refused to play along, you did nothing." Linda crossed her arms. "This is going to have serious consequences. That boy's family could sue." "Then they should sue the HOA, not me," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do." I closed the door before they could respond. My hands were shaking. Part of me felt vindicated for standing my ground, but another part felt terrible about that kid getting hurt. I kept telling myself it was not my fault, that I had not done anything wrong, but the guilt gnawed at me anyway. The next day, Sunday, I thought maybe things would calm down. They did not. Around noon, I heard shouting from the playground again. I looked out the window and saw more kids there, along with several parents. Had they learned nothing from yesterday? I watched in disbelief as 2 girls started climbing on the same structure where the boy had fallen. The ice was still there, just as bad as before. Were these parents insane? Then it happened again. One of the girls, wearing a purple coat, lost her footing on the icy slide and tumbled off the side. She fell about 5 feet and landed hard on the frozen ground. She did not get up right away. "Oh no," I muttered, rushing outside again. By the time I got there, the girl was sitting up, crying. Her father was checking her over, asking if anything hurt. She kept saying her ankle hurt, that she could not move it. "Someone call 911, the father yelled. Another ambulance arrived. The girl had apparently sprained or possibly broken her ankle. As the paramedics worked, I noticed Patricia standing on the other side of the playground, watching. Our eyes met across the distance. She had this expression that I could not quite read, something between concern and calculation. After the ambulance left, I walked over to where a piece of the caution tape someone had finally put up had come loose. It was barely secured, just a few strips around the perimeter that any kid could easily duck under. Too little, too late. "This is your fault," a voice said behind me. I turned to see a man I did not recognize, probably one of the fathers. He was red-faced and angry. "The HOA owns this playground," I said. "Talk to them." "Everyone knows you were supposed to clear the ice," he said. "Patricia told us all about it in the neighborhood email. You refused, and now kids are getting hurt." My jaw dropped. "She what?" "She sent out an email explaining that you were being uncooperative about playground maintenance, that you were disputing your responsibilities." I pulled out my phone and checked my email. Sure enough, there was a message from the HOA that I had ignored earlier. I opened it now and felt my blood pressure rising as I read. Patricia had spun the entire situation to make it look like I was some selfish homeowner refusing to do my part for the community. She made it sound like clearing the ice was obviously and unquestionably my job, and that I was being difficult just for the sake of being difficult. "This is unbelievable," I muttered. "What's unbelievable is that you're letting kids get hurt because of some petty dispute," the man said before walking away. I stood there feeling like I had been punched in the gut. Patricia had poisoned the well. She had turned the entire neighborhood against me. When I got back inside, I immediately called Mike. "They're framing this whole thing to make me look like the bad guy," I told him, explaining about the email and the second injury. "Okay, this is escalating," Mike said. "You need to be really careful here. 2 kids injured is bad. If a third gets hurt, you could be looking at serious legal trouble, even if you're technically in the right." "What do you mean technically?" I demanded. "I am in the right. That's not my playground." I know. But juries don't always care about technical property line disputes when kids are getting hurt. Perception matters. And right now, the perception is that you were notified of a hazard and refused to do anything about it. Because it's not my responsibility. Thomas, I get it. I'm on your side. But you need to think strategically here. If another kid gets hurt, this could really blow up in your face. After I hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, thinking, maybe I should just go out there and clear the ice myself. Not because I agreed that it was my responsibility, but just to prevent more kids from getting hurt. But if I did that now, after 2 injuries, would not that make it look like I was admitting fault? Like I had known it was my job all along and had just been stubborn? I was trapped in a no-win situation. The next morning, Monday, I woke up to find that someone had egged my house. 3 windows were covered in dried egg, and more was splattered across my front door. A note was taped to the door that said, "Clear the playground, you selfish jerk," in angry handwriting. I took pictures of everything and filed a police report, though the officer who came out did not seem very interested. He took down the information and said they would look into it, which I knew meant it would go nowhere. Work that day was miserable. I could not focus on anything. I kept checking my phone, half expecting more bad news. Around lunchtime, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Is this Thomas Brennan?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Rebecca Torres. I'm an attorney representing the family of Jake Morrison, the young boy who was injured on your neighborhood playground." My heart sank. "The playground is not mine. It belongs to the HOA. "That's not what the HOA is saying, Mr. Brennan. They've provided us with documentation showing that you were notified of the hazardous conditions and refused to address them. They're claiming that the section of the playground where Jake fell is on your property." "That's a lie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have the official property survey that shows otherwise. The document they showed me is from 1987 and contradicts the county records." There was a pause. "I'd like to see that survey if you don't mind. Can you email it to me?" "Why would I do that? You're threatening to sue me." "I'm not threatening anything, Mr. Brennan. I'm gathering information. If you can prove that the playground is not your responsibility, that would actually be helpful to know. We want to pursue the party that's actually liable." That made sense, I supposed. I took down her email and said I would think about it. After hanging up, I called Mike again. "Should I send her the survey?" I asked. "Might not be a bad idea," Mike said. "If she sees that the property line is clear, she'll go after the HOA instead of you. That's what you want, right? I guess. This whole thing is just so messed up." "Yeah, it is. Listen, I've been thinking. You should probably get your own lawyer. Someone who specializes in HOA disputes and property law. This is getting too complicated for friendly advice." He was right. That afternoon, I started calling attorneys. Most of them wanted retainers of several $1,000s, which I did not have lying around. I finally found a guy named James Chen who agreed to a consultation for $200. We met that evening at his office in downtown Denver. James was maybe 40, sharp-dressed, with an air of competence that made me feel slightly better about the whole situation. I laid out everything that had happened, showed him all my documentation, and waited for his assessment. "Okay," he said after reviewing everything. "The good news is you're clearly right about the property line. The county survey is the legal document that matters, not some random paper from 1987 that the HOA dug up. The playground is unquestionably HOA property. That's what I've been saying. The bad news is that the HOA has created a narrative where you're the negligent party. They notified you of a hazard, you refused to act, kids got hurt. Even though it's not your legal responsibility, a plaintiff's attorney could potentially argue that you had a moral or ethical duty to prevent foreseeable harm. That's insane." "Welcome to American tort law," James said dryly. "It gets worse. If a third child gets injured, you're going to be facing multiple lawsuits, potentially a class action, and definitely some very negative publicity. Even if you win, and you probably would win, the legal fees alone could bankrupt you. So what do I do? Honestly, the smart move is to clear the ice yourself and then sue the HOA for your costs and damages. But I know that's not what you want to hear." He was right. That was not what I wanted to hear. "What if I don't clear it?" James leaned back in his chair. "Then you're gambling that no one else gets hurt. If you win that gamble, great. You can fight the fines, establish that it's not your responsibility, and maybe even counter-sue for harassment. But if you lose, if another kid gets injured, you're in serious trouble." I left his office feeling worse than when I arrived. The consultation fee put a dent in my bank account, and I was no closer to a solution than before. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about those injured kids, about their parents, about the ice still sitting on that playground. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and looked out the window. The playground was dark and empty, the equipment casting strange shadows in the moonlight. The ice glinted in the light from the nearby street lamp. I could just go out there right now, I thought. Bring some hot water and salt, spend an hour or two clearing it off. No one would even know. I could protect myself and prevent any more kids from getting hurt. But if I did that, Patricia won. The HOA won. They could keep pulling this nonsense, pushing their responsibilities onto homeowners, and no one would ever stand up to them because it was always easier to just comply. I went back to bed without doing anything. Tuesday morning brought a cold front that dropped temperatures back down into the teens. Any melting that had occurred refroze solid. I was getting ready for work when I heard a commotion outside. My stomach immediately knotted up. Not again. I ran to the window and saw exactly what I feared. There was another child on the ground, this time near the swings. Parents were clustering around, someone was calling 911, and I heard a kid crying hysterically, Three kids now. I grabbed my coat and ran outside, my heart pounding. The scene was chaos. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, was sitting on the ground with her leg at an odd angle. Her mother was beside her, trying to comfort her while staying on the phone with emergency services. "What happened?" I asked a nearby father. He turned to me with pure hatred in his eyes. "What happened? Your negligence happened, that's what." "The playground is not mine," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "Tell that to Emma," he said, pointing at the injured girl. "Tell that to her parents when they're at the hospital." The ambulance arrived quickly. The paramedics were starting to recognize this location, which was a terrible sign. They stabilized the girl's leg and transported her. After they left, I noticed Patricia standing nearby with Dennis and Linda. They looked almost triumphant. "I hope you're happy," Patricia called out to me. "3 children injured because of your stubbornness." "Because of your negligence," I shot back. "You own this playground. You're responsible for maintaining it. All of this is your fault." A crowd of parents and neighbors had gathered. They were all looking at me with varying degrees of anger and disgust. I realized I was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Patricia had spent weeks poisoning them against me, framing me as the villain, and now, with 3 injured kids, I looked like a monster. "The HOA board is calling an emergency meeting," Patricia announced loudly. "We're going to discuss legal action against Mr. Brennan for his refusal to maintain common areas and his role in these preventable injuries." "You can't prove anything," I said. "And I have documentation that proves that playground is yours." "We'll see what a judge says," Patricia replied with a cold smile. I went back inside, shaking with anger and fear. This was a nightmare. I pulled out my phone and called James Chen. 3 kids now," I told him. 3 injuries. "The HOA is threatening legal action, and the whole neighborhood hates me." "Okay, we need to act fast," James said. "First, stop talking to anyone about this. No more confrontations with Patricia or other homeowners. Second, I'm going to file a preemptive lawsuit against the HOA for harassment and to establish the property boundaries. Third, we need to document everything and prepare for the worst, which is multiple personal injury lawsuits, potential criminal negligence charges if a prosecutor wants to get involved, and financial ruin. Great. Just great. The rest of that week was a blur of legal consultations, document gathering, and avoiding my neighbors. Someone started a petition to have me removed from the neighborhood, even though that was not legally possible. My mailbox got vandalized. More eggs hit my house. I stopped going outside except to get to my car, and even then I practically ran. James filed our lawsuit against the HOA on Friday. The local news picked up the story that weekend. "HOA dispute leads to multiple child injuries," read the headline. They made me look like a villain who had refused basic community maintenance for petty reasons. The HOA gave statements painting themselves as responsible community leaders trying to enforce reasonable standards. My phone rang constantly with reporters wanting comments. James told me to say nothing, so I did not. That just made me look more guilty in the court of public opinion. Monday morning, exactly 3 weeks after Patricia's first visit to my door, I got served with papers. All 3 families were suing me for negligence. The total amount they were seeking was over $2 million in medical expenses, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the legal documents, feeling completely numb. How had my life fallen apart so quickly over a patch of ice that was not even my responsibility? That afternoon, James came to my house for a meeting. He brought another lawyer with him, a woman named Sarah Henderson who specialized in personal injury defense. "Okay, here's where we stand," James said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. "The good news is that the property line is absolutely clear. The playground is HOA property. We can prove that beyond any doubt. The bad news," Sarah continued, "is that the plaintiffs are going to argue duty to act. They'll say that once you were notified of the hazard, regardless of property ownership, you had a duty to prevent foreseeable harm. Especially since you could see the playground from your house and knew children used it regularly." "That's ridiculous," I said. By that logic, anyone who sees a hazard anywhere has a duty to fix it. It's not as ridiculous as you think, Sarah said. There's legal precedent for duty to act in certain situations. If someone is drowning and you're standing right there with a life preserver, you might have a legal obligation to throw it to them, even if you didn't cause them to fall in the water. But that's not the same thing at all. No, it's not, and we're going to argue that. But the point is, this isn't a slam dunk. The plaintiffs have a case, even if it's weak. How much is this going to cost me? I asked. James and Sarah exchanged a look. To fight all 3 lawsuits through trial. Probably $200,000 minimum, maybe more. I felt sick. I don't have that kind of money. We know. That's why we're going to try for a settlement and focus on getting the HOA to take responsibility. We're also going to counter-sue them for harassment, defamation, and breach of their duty to maintain common areas. Hopefully, we can get them to cover your legal fees and dismiss the claims against you. And if they refuse, then we go to trial and hope for the best. Over the next 2 months, my life became consumed by legal proceedings. The HOA fought back hard, insisting that I was responsible. They produced that ancient 1987 document and argued it superseded the county survey. Their lawyer was some high-priced firm from Denver that specialized in HOA law, and they had deep pockets to draw from. Apparently, the HOA had liability insurance that was covering their legal costs. I, meanwhile, was watching my savings evaporate. James and Sarah were doing their best to keep costs down, but legal work is expensive. I had to take out a second mortgage on my house just to pay the bills. The families of the injured kids were sympathetic plaintiffs. Jake Morrison, the first boy, had broken his arm in 2 places and needed surgery. The girl who fell second, Lily Chen, had a severe ankle sprain that required physical therapy. Emma Rodriguez, the third victim, had broken her leg badly and spent a week in the hospital. All 3 kids had medical bills, ongoing treatment needs, and understandable trauma from their injuries. In depositions, I had to sit across from their parents and explain why I had not cleared the ice. It was brutal. How do you tell a mother whose daughter broke her leg that you did not do something that might have prevented it because of a property line dispute? Even though I knew I was right, even though it really was not my responsibility, I felt like a monster. The HOA, meanwhile, kept sending me fines. They were up to over $10,000 now, accumulated at $100 per day. James had gotten a temporary injunction stopping the fines while our lawsuit was pending, but they still claimed I owed the money. In April, things finally started to shift. Sarah managed to get the county to issue an official statement confirming that the playground was entirely on HOA property and that I had no legal responsibility for its maintenance. This was a huge win. With that official confirmation, the plaintiff's lawyers started to realize their case against me was weak. Around the same time, someone leaked internal HOA emails to the local news. The emails showed that Patricia and the board had discussed the ice situation and had deliberately chosen not to address it in order to force the property line issue. There was even an email where Patricia wrote, "If Brennan won't comply, we'll let him deal with the consequences." The news coverage shifted dramatically. Suddenly, the story was not about me refusing to maintain common areas, but about an HOA that had knowingly left a dangerous condition unaddressed as part of a petty dispute. Patricia tried to do damage control, but the emails were damning. The plaintiff's attorneys approached James about dropping their suits against me and adding the HOA as a defendant. James negotiated hard. He wanted not just dismissal but official statements that I was not at fault. After a week of back and forth, they agreed. In early May, all three families dropped their lawsuits against me and filed new ones against the HOA. The HOA's insurance company took one look at the situation and pushed for settlement. By mid-May, the families had settled for undisclosed amounts that apparently covered all their medical bills plus additional compensation. But I was not done. My countersuit against the HOA was still pending, and I wanted blood. James and Sarah had added claims for emotional distress, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional harm. We were seeking my legal fees, which were now over $150,000, plus additional damages. The HOA tried to fight it, but their position was weak. The leaked emails had destroyed any credibility they had. In June, we went to mediation. The HOA's insurance company was there, and they were clearly tired of the whole thing. After 12 hours of negotiation, we reached a settlement. The HOA would pay my legal fees in full, pay me an additional $75,000 in damages, issue a formal apology to me and the neighborhood, and remove Patricia Anderson and the rest of the board from their positions. Additionally, the HOA would implement new policies requiring proper maintenance of common areas and prohibiting them from trying to assign maintenance responsibilities to individual homeowners. I wanted Patricia to face criminal charges for what she had done, but the prosecutor's office declined to pursue it. According to them, while her actions were unethical and possibly negligent, they did not rise to the level of criminal conduct. She had not broken any specific laws, just made really terrible decisions. Still, her reputation was destroyed. The news coverage had been extensive, and everyone knew what she had done. She ended up moving out of the neighborhood that summer, selling her house at a loss just to get away from the constant judgment and anger of the other residents. The new HOA board, elected in July, was much more reasonable. They apologized to me personally and worked to repair the neighborhood's relationship with me. Some neighbors apologized directly for how they had treated me during the crisis. Others just avoided eye contact, which was fine by me. As for the playground, the HOA installed all new equipment that summer and implemented a proper maintenance schedule. They also put up clear warning signs about weather conditions and installed better drainage to prevent ice accumulation. No more kids got injured. I stayed in my house despite everything. Some people asked why I did not just move after all that, and honestly, I considered it. But this was my home. I had lived here for 5 years before Patricia started her crusade, and I was not going to let her chase me away. Besides, with the settlement money, I paid off my second mortgage and actually came out ahead financially, though that felt like cold comfort for all the stress and heartache. Looking back on the whole situation, I still believe I was right to stand my ground on the principle of the thing. That playground was not my responsibility, and the HOA had no right to try to force it on me. But I also can't escape the fact that 3 kids got hurt, and maybe, just maybe, if I had swallowed my pride and cleared the ice, those injuries would not have happened. Mike told me not to think that way. "You didn't create the dangerous situation," he said. "The HOA did by failing to maintain their property. Then they deliberately left it dangerous to force your hand. The injuries are on them, not you." Intellectually, I knew he was right. Emotionally, it was harder to accept. The incident taught me a lot about HOAs and how much power they have over people's lives. It also taught me about standing up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when people hate you for it. Sometimes doing the right thing means being the villain in other people's stories. Patricia's replacement as HOA president was a retired teacher named George Williams, a genuinely nice guy who actually cared about the community rather than power. Under his leadership, the HOA became functional and reasonable. They maintained common areas properly, communicated clearly with residents, and did not try to overstep their authority. The families of the injured kids all received their settlements, and from what I heard, the kids recovered well. Jake's arm healed completely. Lily's ankle took longer but eventually got back to normal. Emma had the hardest recovery with her broken leg, but by the time school started in August, she was walking without a limp. I ran into Emma's mother, Mrs. Rodriguez, at the grocery store in September. I had been avoiding eye contact, expecting anger or at least coldness, but she approached me directly. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "I wanted to apologize. I was stunned. You want to apologize? Your daughter broke her leg." "Because the HOA was negligent," she said firmly. "I've seen the emails. I know what Patricia did. You weren't responsible for maintaining that playground and you tried to tell everyone that. I'm sorry we didn't listen. I'm sorry my family sued you." "The lawsuit got dropped," I said. "It's fine." "It's not fine. You went through hell because that woman had a power trip. Emma's doing well now and the settlement covered all her medical costs and then some. I just wanted you to know that I don't blame you. A lot of us don't. Patricia manipulated the whole neighborhood." We talked for a few more minutes. It did not erase the months of stress and fear, but it helped. Over the following weeks, other neighbors reached out with similar sentiments. The community was slowly healing from the division Patricia had caused. In October, I attended my first HOA meeting since the whole mess started. I had avoided them during the legal proceedings, but George had personally invited me and promised it would not be hostile. He was right. The meeting was actually productive and civil. They discussed normal stuff like landscaping contracts and pool schedules, not petty power plays and property line disputes. After the meeting, George pulled me aside. "I know this year has been rough," he said, "but I hope you'll stay involved with the HOA. We need people who aren't afraid to stand up to nonsense." "I'll think about it," I said. I was not ready to join the board or anything, but attending meetings occasionally seemed manageable. As winter approached again, I found myself watching the playground from my kitchen window, just like I had a year earlier. But this time, the HOA had already hired a maintenance crew to handle ice and snow removal. They came out after every storm, salting and clearing not just the playground but all the common areas. The difference was night and day. Kids played on the equipment safely all winter. There were no injuries, no fights about responsibility, no legal battles. It was how things should have been from the beginning. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondered where she had moved and whether she had learned anything from the experience. Probably not. People like that rarely did. She had probably convinced herself that she was the victim, that I was the unreasonable one, that everything that happened was someone else's fault. But that was not my problem anymore. My relationship with the neighborhood continued to improve. By the time the following spring arrived, things felt almost normal. I went to backyard barbecues, chatted with neighbors while getting my mail, and generally felt like part of the community again. The incident became something people referenced occasionally, but did not dwell on. "Remember that crazy ice thing?" someone would say, and others would nod, and that would be it. We had moved on. The legal settlement money sat in my bank account, most of it earmarked for retirement savings now that the legal fees and second mortgage were paid off. Sometimes I joked with Mike that I should thank Patricia for accidentally making me $75,000 richer. But we both knew the money was not worth the stress and pain of those months. In June, exactly 18 months after Patricia's first visit to my door, the Meadowbrook Heights HOA held its annual community picnic. It was in the park near the playground, the same playground where 3 kids had been injured. But now it was safe, well-maintained, with brand-new equipment and proper safety surfacing. I went to the picnic, bringing a potato salad my mother had taught me to make. Kids were playing everywhere, including on the playground equipment. Parents were relaxed, chatting and laughing, not worried about their children getting hurt on poorly maintained equipment. George gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the previous year's difficulties, and emphasizing the new HOA's commitment to transparency and proper maintenance. He did not mention Patricia by name, but everyone knew what he was talking about. After the speech, Mrs. Rodriguez approached me again. Emma was with her, running around with other kids, completely healed. "She's doing great," Mrs. Rodriguez said, following my gaze. "You'd never know she broke her leg." "That's really good to see," I said sincerely. "I still think about that day sometimes," she admitted. "I was so angry, so desperate to blame someone. Patricia made it easy to blame you, but you were just trying to stand up for what was right." 3 kids got hurt, though," I said quietly. "That's the part I can't get past." 3 kids got hurt because Patricia Anderson chose to play games with people's safety, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "You didn't make that choice. She did. Please stop blaming yourself." Easier said than done, but I appreciated the sentiment. The picnic continued into the evening. Someone had brought a portable speaker and music played while people danced and kids chased each other around. The sun set behind the mountains in that spectacular way it does in Colorado, painting the sky orange and pink. Standing there, watching my community come together in a genuinely positive way, I felt something I had not felt in a long time: peace. The nightmare was truly over. Life had returned to normal, better even, with an HOA that actually functioned properly and neighbors who had learned the value of questioning authority rather than blindly following it. As I drove home that night, I passed the neighborhood entrance with its expensive stone sign that had started the whole mess. Someone had planted flowers around it, and it actually looked nice rather than pretentious. Even that symbol of Patricia's excess had been reclaimed and made into something positive. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at my house. The egg stains were long gone. The vandalism had been repaired. Everything looked normal and peaceful. Inside, I knew, were boxes of legal documents that I would probably keep forever, just in case. But I did not need to look at them anymore. That chapter was closed. The final piece of closure came in August when I received a letter from the state HOA regulatory board. Apparently, several residents had filed complaints about Patricia's conduct, and the board had investigated. While they could not take criminal action, they had placed her name on a registry that prevented her from serving on any HOA board in Colorado for 5 years. It was not much, but it was something. I framed that letter and hung it in my office, not out of spite, but as a reminder. A reminder that standing up to abuse of power matters, even when it is hard. A reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is also the most difficult thing. And a reminder that communities can heal and move forward when good people step up to lead. Life went on. I continued working, maintained my house, and participated in neighborhood activities. The playground incident became part of my personal history, a defining moment that shaped how I viewed authority and community responsibility. But it did not consume me or define me. Years from now, I will probably tell this story to people as a cautionary tale about HOAs and the importance of reading your bylaws before buying a house. I will explain how a simple dispute about ice on a playground spiraled into a legal nightmare that cost everyone involved dearly. And I will emphasize the lesson I learned. Sometimes standing on principle is worth the cost, but you better be prepared for the fight that comes with it. But I will also tell them about the aftermath, about how the community came together and reformed its HOA, about how 3 injured kids recovered fully, and about how even the darkest situations can lead to positive change. Because that is equally important. Yes, Patricia's negligence and power games hurt people. Yes, the legal battle was expensive and stressful, but in the end, the neighborhood became stronger and more united. We learned to question authority, to demand accountability, and to stand together against abuse of power. That winter, when the first snow fell, I watched from my window as the HOA maintenance crew immediately cleared the playground and applied salt. Kids played safely in the snow, building snowmen near the equipment and having snowball fights. Their laughter carried through the cold air, a sound that had been absent during those dark months when the playground sat dangerous and unused. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to that sound, to those kids, to their safety, and to the long, difficult journey that had brought us here. Then I turned away from the window and got on with my day. The ice was gone, the playground was safe, and life in Meadowbrook Heights had finally, truly returned to normal. The battle was over, and while victory had come at a high cost, it had come nonetheless. Patricia and her corrupt board were gone. The children were safe, and I still had my home, my principles, and my dignity intact. In the end, that was all that mattered.